The void of space stretched endlessly around the UES horizon as it drifted near the edge of known space. Captain Lee Dae-ho stood on the bridge, his dark eyes scanning the star charts displayed on the main screen. 3 months into their deep space mission, they had found nothing but empty systems and dead worlds. "Captain, we're getting something strange on long-range sensors," called out Communications Officer Park So-min from her station. Her fingers danced across the control panels as she tried to make sense of the readings. Lee walked over to her station and leaned down to look at the display. "What kind of something?" "Unknown energy signatures, sir. Multiple contacts moving in formation. They're big, whatever they are." Park So-min adjusted her headset and frowned. "Sir, they're heading straight for us." The bridge fell silent except for the quiet hum of the ship's systems. Lee felt his stomach tighten. After decades of searching, humanity had finally found proof. They were not alone in the universe. The question was whether this first meeting would be friendly or hostile. "Wake up the night shift," Lee ordered. "Bring us to yellow alert, but keep weapons powered down. We don't want to seem threatening." Tactical Officer Kim Tae-won looked up from his station. "Sir, should I prep the defense systems?" "Negative. We follow first contact protocols. We're explorers, not warriors." Lee moved to the center of the bridge. "Park, prepare a greeting message on all frequencies. Basic mathematics and peaceful intentions." As the crew worked, the unknown contacts grew larger on their screens. 5 massive ships emerged from the darkness, each one easily 3 times the size of the horizon. Their hulls were dark and angular, covered in what looked like armor plating and weapon emplacements. "My God," whispered Navigator Yoon Hairi. "Those are warships." The lead alien vessel was enormous, bristling with gun turrets and missile pods. Strange symbols glowed along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at for too long. The other 4 ships spread out in attack formation, surrounding the human vessel. "They're scanning us," reported Kim Tae-won. "Multiple active sensor sweeps. They're being very thorough." Lee nodded grimly. "Keep transmitting our peaceful message. Maybe they're just being careful." The alien ships completed their scan and moved closer. The lead vessel was now close enough that they could see details on its hull. Docking ports, sensor arrays, and what were definitely weapon systems covered every surface. Suddenly, all communication channels erupted with an alien voice. The words were harsh and guttural, unlike any human language. The universal translator struggled to make sense of it before finally producing broken English words on the screens. "Primitive vessel. You will surrender immediately. Prepare for boarding and enslavement. Resistance will result in destruction." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. Lee felt his jaw tighten. This was not the first contact scenario they had prepared for. "Keep transmitting our peaceful intentions," he ordered. "Tell them we come in peace and want to talk." Park So-min worked frantically at her station. "I'm sending everything we have, sir. Mathematical constants, star charts, images of Earth. They're not responding to any of it." The alien voice came again, louder and more threatening. "You have 10 of your time units to comply. Lower your shields and prepare for boarding. Your species will serve the Galactic Dominion Empire." "Empire?" Lee muttered. "That doesn't sound good." On the main screen, weapon ports began opening along the hull of the lead alien ship. Energy readings spiked as they charged their weapons. Systems engineer Choi Min-ho spoke up from his station. "Captain, their weapon signatures are off the charts. If they fire on us, our shields won't last more than a few seconds." Lee closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Humanity's first contact with alien life, and it was starting with threats of slavery and death. He thought about the people back on Earth, the families who would never know what happened to the horizon if things went wrong. "Sir, they're powering up all weapon systems," Kim Tae-won reported, his voice tight with stress. The alien voice returned, now with obvious anger. "Final warning, primitives. Submit or be destroyed. The Vorthak Empire shows no mercy to those who resist." Through the viewports, they could see the alien ships positioning themselves for attack. The lead vessel, easily the size of a city block, aimed its massive gun batteries directly at the horizon. Lee looked around at his crew. These men and women had volunteered for this mission knowing they might never return home. They were explorers and scientists, not soldiers. But they were also human beings, and humans did not kneel to anyone. Park, send one final message to the aliens, Lee said quietly. Tell them we refuse their demands. We are free people and we will not be enslaved. Sir? Park So-min looked shocked. Captain, they'll destroy us. Maybe, Lee replied. But we won't go down without a fight. Choi, begin emergency protocols. Kim, bring all defensive systems online. Captain, Kim Tae-won said carefully, we're an exploration ship. Our weapons are minimal. We can't fight those warships. Lee walked to the captain's chair and activated the ship's internal communication system. His voice echoed through every corridor and room of the horizon. All hands, this is the captain. We have encountered alien vessels that have demanded our surrender and enslavement. As representatives of humanity, we cannot, and will not, comply with these demands. Prepare for combat operations. The alien ships moved closer, their weapons fully charged and ready to fire. The lead vessel sent one more message. Foolish primitives, you choose death over servitude. So be it. The space around the horizon lit up as the alien weapons fired. Massive energy bolts and plasma projectiles streaked toward the human ship. The crew braced for impact, knowing their shields could not possibly stop such an assault. But Lee had not told his crew everything about their mission. The UES Horizon was not just an exploration vessel. It was something much more dangerous, and the aliens were about to learn that humanity was full of surprises. Kim, Lee said calmly as the enemy fire approached, drop the masquerade. Show them what a human warship really looks like. Kim Tae-won smiled grimly and reached for a console that had remained covered and unused throughout their entire mission. With pleasure, sir. Kim Tae-won pressed the hidden console, and the UES Horizon began to change. The first thing the Vorthak noticed was the sound. A deep rumbling echoed through space as massive sections of the ship's hull began to move. What the aliens had thought was a simple exploration vessel started to unfold like a deadly flower, blooming in the darkness. Admiral Kith Carr stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, watching the impossible sight before him. His reptilian eyes widened as armor plates that had been hidden inside the human ship slid outward. Gun turrets emerged from concealed bays. Missile launchers rose from what had appeared to be cargo holds. What is happening? Kith Carr hissed to his tactical officer. How is their ship changing? The tactical officer, a younger Vorthak named Grextal, stared at his instruments in confusion. Admiral, their mass readings are increasing. The ship is becoming larger. On the horizon's bridge, Engineer Choi Min-ho watched his displays with satisfaction as all systems came online. Armor deployment complete, Captain. All weapon systems are active. Power core is operating at full capacity. Captain Lee Dae-ho nodded as he watched the transformation through the main viewport. The horizon was no longer the peaceful exploration ship it had pretended to be. Now it looked like what it truly was, a cutting-edge military vessel designed for deep space operations. Navigator Yoon, plot attack vectors on the lead ship, Lee ordered. Communications Officer Park, open a channel to the alien fleet. Park So-min worked quickly at her station. Channel open, sir. Lee stepped forward and spoke clearly. Attention, Vorthak fleet. You wanted to see a human warship. Congratulations. You're looking at one. The alien plasma bolts that had been racing toward the horizon struck the newly deployed armor. Instead of the devastating explosion the Vorthak expected, the energy simply spread across the hull and dissipated harmlessly. Admiral Kith Carr felt his blood run cold. In 300 years of conquest, he had never seen armor that could absorb plasma fire so easily. All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel. Maximum power. The 5 Vorthak warships opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, plasma cannons, and fusion torpedoes filled the space around the horizon. The human ship disappeared, behind a wall of destructive force that should have vaporized any known vessel. When the fire stopped and the energy dispersed, the horizon emerged completely undamaged. Impossible, whispered Grextal. Nothing can survive that much firepower. Captain Lee turned to his tactical officer. Kim, show them what human weapons can do. Target their lead ship's shield generators. Kim Tae-wan smiled as he locked onto his target. Firing particle beam array. The Horizon's main weapon activated with a brilliant flash of blue light. The beam struck the destroyer of worlds directly amidships, and something unprecedented happened. The Vorthak shield, which had never failed in battle, flickered and died. Kithkar stumbled as his ship shook from the impact. Shields are down, reported his engineering officer. The human weapon went right through them. How is that possible? Kithkar demanded. Before anyone could answer, the Horizon fired again. This time the beam carved a deep gouge along the length of the Vorthak flagship. Atmosphere vented from the wound as entire sections of the ship were destroyed. Return fire, Kithkar screamed. All ships, destroy that vessel. The other Vorthak ships turned their weapons on the Horizon, but the human ship was no longer where it had been. Navigator Yoon Hairi had plotted a course that put them behind the alien formation, moving faster than the Vorthak had thought possible. How are they so quick? Grextal asked as he watched the human ship dance between their weapons fire. Their ship should be too heavy for such maneuvers. The Horizon fired again and another Vorthak vessel lost its shields. Then the human ship did something that made the aliens freeze in terror. Smaller ships began launching from hidden bays along the Horizon's hull. Fighter craft deploying, reported Tactical Officer Kim. Drones are online and ready for attack runs. The human drones were unlike anything in the Vorthak arsenal. They were small, fast, and incredibly aggressive. They swarmed around the alien ships like angry insects, firing rapid pulses from their energy weapons. Admiral Kithkar watched in growing panic as his formation fell apart. The human drones were too small and fast to target effectively, but their weapons were powerful enough to damage his ship's hull plating. Sir, called out Engineer Choi from his station, enemy ships are trying to retreat. Should we pursue? Captain Lee considered the question. His orders were to explore and make peaceful contact with alien life. But these aliens had threatened to enslave humanity. They had fired first and shown no interest in diplomacy. Let one ship escape, Lee decided, but disable the others. We need to study their technology and learn more about this empire they mentioned. The Horizon and its drone fighters moved through the Vorthak formation like a shark among minnows. Each human weapon struck with perfect accuracy, disabling engines and weapon systems while carefully avoiding the aliens' life support. Within minutes, 4 of the 5 Vorthak warships were drifting helplessly in space. Only Admiral Kithkar's flagship still had power, and that was because Captain Lee had ordered his crew to let it escape. This is impossible, Kithkar muttered, as he watched his fleet burning around him. We are the Vorthak Empire. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. How can one primitive ship defeat us? The human voice came across the communication channel again, calm and controlled. Admiral Kithkar, your ships are disabled, but your crews are alive. Take this message back to your empire. Humanity will not be enslaved. We have no interest in conquest, but we will defend ourselves and others from tyrants. Kithkar's ship limped away from the battle site, its engines barely functioning. Behind him, the impossible human vessel began recovering the escape pods from his destroyed ships. On the Horizon's bridge, Dr. Shin Yun-soo looked up from her analysis station. Captain, I'm reading life signs from multiple species on those ships, not just the reptilian ones that were giving orders. Lee frowned. Multiple species? Yes, sir. It appears they have crews made up of different alien races, but the brain scans suggest many of them are showing signs of mental conditioning. They might be slaves. Captain Lee felt a cold anger building in his chest. An empire that enslaved other species was something humanity could never ignore. Park, prepare a message burst to Earth Command, he ordered. Tell them we've made contact with hostile aliens who practice slavery. We're going to need reinforcements, as the Horizon began its journey back to human space with captured alien technology and rescued prisoners. None of them realized they had just started the largest war in galactic history. The throne room of Emperor Vorthithal was a massive chamber carved from black stone, lit by fires that burned without fuel. The emperor himself sat on a throne made from the bones of defeated enemies, his ancient reptilian form draped in robes, woven from the silk of conquered worlds. Admiral Kithkar knelt before his master, his body still bearing the scars from the human attack. His flagship had barely made it back to the capital world, limping through hyperspace with failing engines, and a crew of terrified survivors. "Rise," Emperor Vorthithal commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber like distant thunder. "Tell me of these humans." Kithkar stood slowly, his pride wounded more than his body. "My emperor, they are unlike any species we have encountered. Their ship appeared to be a simple exploration vessel, but it transformed into something far more dangerous." The emperor leaned forward, his yellow eyes glowing in the firelight. "Transformed? Explain." "Hidden weapons, armor plating that emerged from concealment, fighter craft that we could not detect until they attacked." Kithkar's voice grew quiet. "Their weapons cut through our shields as if they did not exist. Their armor absorbed our most powerful attacks without damage." In the shadows at the edge of the throne room, Chief Analyst Grethmar listened carefully. He was the Empire's leading expert on alien technology, and what he was hearing should have been impossible. "How many ships did they have?" the Emperor asked. "One, my lord. A single vessel defeated our entire squadron." The throne room fell silent except for the crackling of the eternal flames. Emperor Vorthithal had ruled the galaxy for 800 years. In all that time, no single ship had ever defeated a Vorthak squadron. "Bring me the battle recordings," the Emperor commanded. Grethmar stepped forward from the shadows, a crystal data storage device in his clawed hands. The room's walls flickered to life, showing the holographic replay of the battle. The assembled Vorthak nobles watched in stunned silence as the human ship transformed before their eyes. They saw their mighty warships reduced to floating scrap, by weapons they had never imagined. They watched as their shields, the foundation of their military superiority, failed completely against human technology. "Pause the recording," Emperor Vorthithal ordered. The image froze on the moment when the human ship had appeared from behind their formation, moving impossibly fast for something so large. Grethmar, analysis. The chief analyst activated his own devices, studying the frozen image. "My emperor, their technology operates on principles we do not understand. Their armor appears to absorb and redistribute energy, rather than simply resisting it. Their weapons use particle acceleration techniques that should not be possible with their apparent power source." "What do you mean, should not be possible?" "The energy requirements for weapons of that power would need a reactor the size of a small moon. Yet their ship is relatively compact. They have solved engineering problems that our greatest minds have struggled with for centuries." Emperor Vorthithal stood from his throne, his massive form casting long shadows across the chamber. "Continue the recording." They watched as the human drones swarmed through their formation. The nobles saw their supposedly invincible fleet reduced to helpless victims in a matter of minutes. "They could have destroyed all our ships," observed General Krexthor, the Emperor's military advisor. "But they chose to disable rather than kill. They showed mercy." "Mercy?" The Emperor's voice carried a dangerous edge. "The Vorthak Empire does not need mercy from primitives." "With respect, my lord," Krexthor said carefully, "they do not appear to be primitives." The recording played to its end, showing Admiral Kithkar's damaged flagship fleeing the battle while the human vessel recovered survivors from the disabled ships. "How many did we lose?" the Emperor asked. 2,000 dead, 8,000 captured, Kithkar replied. "The humans took all survivors as prisoners." "Prisoners," the Emperor mused. "Not slaves. Interesting." In the depths of space, far from the imperial capital, word of the human victory was spreading through channels the Empire did not know existed. On the mining world of Clith Prime, insectoid workers paused in their labor as they heard whispered rumors of ships that could defeat the Vorthak. Zikth, a Clith warrior who had been enslaved for 30 years, listened to the story with growing excitement. His people had been the first species conquered by the Empire. Their homeworld turned into a massive mining operation. For 3 decades he had waited for someone, anyone, to challenge Vorthak rule. "Is it true?" asked another worker, her voice barely audible over the sound of the mining machines. "Did someone really defeat a Vorthak squadron?" "The story comes from many sources," Zikth replied. "Different ships, different crews, all telling the same tale. Humans, a species that fights back. On the crystal world of Nethros, beings made of living mineral communicated through vibrations in the planet's crust. The news of the human victory spread through their crystalline network faster than any traditional communication system. The Nethros had been enslaved for their unique ability to process information at incredible speeds. They served as living computers for the Empire, their minds linked together to solve complex problems. But now they were using that same network to share hope. The aquatic Delphari, forced to work in underwater factories on ocean worlds throughout the Empire, heard the news through sonic transmissions that traveled through their planet's seas. For 200 years they had served the Empire, their beautiful coral cities converted into industrial complexes. Dr. Shin Yon-Su aboard the UES Horizon was studying the rescued prisoners when she made a disturbing discovery. The alien crews were not just from different species, they showed clear signs of mental conditioning and control. "Captain Lee," she called out, looking up from her medical scanners. "These prisoners, they're not willing servants. They've been brainwashed." Captain Lee Daeho examined the data on her screen. Brain scans showed patterns consistent with forced neural conditioning, the kind used to break the will of captured populations. "How extensive is this?" he asked. "Every non-Vorthak crew member shows signs of mental manipulation. Some have been conditioned for decades." Dr. Shin's voice was tight with anger. "Captain, this isn't just an empire. It's a slave state that spans the galaxy." Captain Lee felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity had found other intelligent life, but that life was suffering under the boot of tyranny. The choice before him was simple: ignore the situation and return to Earth, or do something about it. "Park, prepare another message to Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them we need more than reinforcements, we need a liberation fleet." 3 months after the first battle, space itself seemed to tear open near the edge of Vorthak territory. Massive rifts of blue energy appeared in the void, and from them emerged something that made the Empire's long-range sensors scream with alarm. The human colonial defense fleet had arrived. Admiral Park Jong-soo stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, watching as his fleet completed its hyperspace jump. Around his flagship, dozens of massive human warships took their positions in perfect formation. These were not exploration vessels in disguise. They were purpose-built instruments of war. "Fleet status report," Admiral Park commanded. "All ships." "Operational, sir," reported his aide, Commander Ryu Seung-ho. 47 vessels ready for combat operations. The human fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where other species built sleek, elegant ships that flowed through space like sea creatures, humans built fortresses. Their vessels were angular blocks of armor and weapons designed to take punishment and keep fighting. On the Vorthak border station Omega-7, alarm sirens wailed as the duty officer stared at his sensors in disbelief. "Get me Imperial Command," he ordered, his voice shaking. "Tell them the humans are here, all of them." The largest human ship dwarfed even Vorthak dreadnoughts. The Indomitable was more than a warship. It was a mobile battle station bristling with weapon systems that the Empire's scientists could not identify. Alongside the battleships came carriers disgorging swarms of fighter craft. Commander Oh Jae-hyun led a destroyer squadron that moved through space with predatory grace. Each destroyer was small by capital ship standards, but carried enough firepower to level a city. "Admiral," called out Communications Officer Lee Sung-min, "we're receiving a transmission from Captain Lee Daeho aboard the Horizon." "Put him through," Admiral Park ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing Captain Lee on the bridge of his ship. Behind him, the rescued alien prisoners could be seen working alongside human crew members. "Admiral Park, good to see you," Captain Lee said with a tired smile. "I trust you received my full report?" "We did. A galactic empire built on slavery." Admiral Park's expression was grim. "The President himself authorized this mission. We're here to put an end to it. Sir, I should warn you, these Vorthak have been conquering species for over 1,000 years. They have vast fleets and weapons we haven't fully analyzed yet. Admiral Park nodded. That's why we brought friends. As if on cue, more hyperspace rifts opened near the human fleet. But these ships were different. They were clearly alien in design, built by the crystalline Nethros, the insectoid Clith, and the aquatic Delphari. Rebel fleets from 17 different species have joined us, Admiral Park explained. It seems your victory inspired more than just humans. On the bridge of the Vorthak command station, General Krexthor watched the impossible sight with growing dread. The human fleet alone outnumbered his border patrol, but combined with the rebel ships, they faced a force unlike any in Imperial history. Send word to all fleets, he ordered. The humans have returned and they brought the entire galaxy with them. The first battle of the Liberation War began when Commander O.J. Hyun's destroyer squadron encountered a Vorthak patrol fleet. The human destroyers moved in perfect coordination, their captains communicating through encrypted channels that the Empire could not break. Target their shield generators first, O commanded. Disable, don't destroy. We want prisoners for intelligence. The human weapons had been improved since the first encounter. The new particle beam arrays could punch through Vorthak shields in a single shot. The Empire's mighty warships found themselves defenseless against technology they could not understand or counter. But the humans had learned more than just improved weapons. They had studied captured Vorthak tactical manuals and identified weaknesses in Imperial doctrine. Fleet Captain Nam Soo-jin led the carrier wing, her fighters piloted by veterans who had trained for months specifically to fight Vorthak vessels. Squadron leader Bae Dong-min dove his fighter through the enemy formation, his wingmen following in perfect synchronization. Remember your training, Bae called over the comm system. They expect us to fight like their previous enemies. Show them human tactics. The human fighters used unpredictable attack patterns that confused Vorthak gunners. They flew in ways that seemed reckless but were actually carefully calculated to exploit blind spots in Imperial ship design. When Vorthak reinforcements arrived, they found their patrol fleet disabled and drifting. The humans had achieved complete victory without destroying a single enemy ship. How is this possible? Demanded Admiral Drexmore, commander of the Vorthak Third Fleet. They fight like they know our every weakness. He was right. The liberated prisoners from Captain Lee's first battle had provided detailed information about Imperial technology and tactics. Human intelligence officers had spent months analyzing every piece of data, looking for ways to turn the Empire's own strengths against them. The news of the battle spread through both Imperial and Rebel channels. On enslaved worlds throughout the galaxy, oppressed species began to believe that freedom was possible. But Emperor Vorthithal was not ready to surrender his empire without a fight. He issued orders that would bring the full might of the Vorthak war machine against the human-led alliance. Assemble the Grand Fleet, he commanded. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior. These humans want a war. We will give them the greatest war in galactic history. Admiral Park received the intelligence reports about the Imperial mobilization with quiet satisfaction. The Emperor was doing exactly what human strategists had predicted. Sir? Asked Commander. Ryu, aren't you concerned about facing their entire fleet? Admiral Park smiled, the expression of a man who had planned for this exact scenario. Commander, the Empire has spent 1,000 years conquering individual species one at a time. They've never faced a united galaxy before. He gestured to the tactical display, where rebel fleets from dozens of species were taking positions throughout Imperial space. They're about to learn that there's a big difference between ruling slaves and fighting free people. Deep beneath the surface of Clith Prime, in tunnels that had been carved by generations of enslaved workers, Zikth gathered his fellow rebels around a stolen Imperial communication device. The insectoid warrior's 4 arms gestured excitedly as he shared the latest news from across the galaxy. The humans have won another battle. He clicked in the rapid language of his people. 3 Vorthak fleets destroyed at the Kepler station. The liberation forces grow stronger each day. Around him, hundreds of Clith workers listened with growing hope. For 30 years, they had labored in the mines, extracting precious metals that powered the Imperial war machine. Now for the first time they dared to dream of freedom. "What can we do?" asked Nexty, a younger female whose wings had been clipped to prevent escape attempts. "We have no weapons, no ships." Zicht's compound eyes gleamed with determination. "We have something better. We have knowledge of how this world operates. Tonight we take control of the mining facilities." On the crystal world of Nethros, the uprising took a different form. The crystalline beings communicated through vibrations that traveled through their planet structure faster than any electronic signal. In moments, every Nethros on the world knew that the time for revolution had come. Their overseer, a brutal Vorthak commander named Gorthak, noticed something wrong when the processing plants began to slow down. The Nethros workers were supposed to be operating the massive computers that coordinated Imperial logistics across dozens of star systems. "Increase the work pace," he snarled at the nearest crystalline being. "The Empire needs those shipping calculations completed." The Nethros, a being called Shimmering Light Through Crystal, replied with sounds like wind chimes in a breeze. "We regret to inform you that we are no longer working for the Empire." Before Gorthak could react, every piece of Imperial technology on the planet suddenly shut down. The Nethros had used their connection to the computer systems to lock out all Vorthak access codes. In the depths of Delphari's oceans, the aquatic rebels were more direct in their approach. Flowing Current of Deep Waters led a strike team against the underwater weapons factory where his people had been forced to build Imperial torpedoes for 2 centuries. The Delphari moved through the water with grace that no other species could match. They had spent generations mapping every current and thermal layer of their ocean world. When they struck, it was with the force of a tsunami. "The thermal vents are sealed," reported one of his warriors, her bioluminescent patches flashing in, the underwater language of their people. "The factories are flooded with superheated water." "Good," Flowing Current replied. "Let the Empire try to build weapons in a boiling ocean." The coordinated uprisings across the galaxy were not accidental. Human Special Forces teams had been working with rebel leaders for months, providing training and equipment while carefully avoiding direct involvement that might justify Imperial retaliation against Earth. Colonel Jiang Min-suk crouched in the ruins of a bombed-out city on the industrial world of Farron 3, watching through night vision goggles as his team prepared for their next mission. Around him, soldiers from a dozen different species worked together with the efficiency of a unit that had been training together for years. "Target is the planetary defense grid," he whispered into his communication device. "Our job is to disable the orbital cannons so the fleet can approach safely." Lieutenant Quan Yunji checked her demolition charges one final time. The young explosives expert had volunteered for the most dangerous missions, always insisting on personally placing the charges that would cripple Imperial infrastructure. "Charges are set, Colonel," she reported. "The power relays will be down for weeks." Sergeant Moon Hyan Wu led a squad of native fighters through the facility's corridors. The liberated aliens fought with desperate courage, knowing that capture meant death or worse. But under human training, their courage had become focused and effective. "Remember what we taught you," Moon whispered to a Zephyrian rebel whose people resembled giant birds. "Speed and surprise. Hit hard, then disappear." The explosion that followed could be seen from orbit. The planetary defense grid, which had protected Imperial facilities for decades, went dark in a matter of seconds. Similar sabotage missions were taking place on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. The Empire found itself fighting fires throughout its territory, while trying to concentrate forces against the main human fleet. Dr. Lim Ga-young worked from a mobile command center aboard a converted merchant ship, coordinating communication between rebel species who had never been able to talk to each other before. Her xenopsychology background made her uniquely qualified to bridge the cultural gaps between radically different forms of life. The Clith use scent markers to convey emotional context, she explained to a Delphari commander whose people communicated through water pressure changes. When they say the attack succeeded with joy scent, it means they suffered no casualties. Her work was creating something that had never existed before, a true galactic alliance where different species could work together as equals rather than as rulers and subjects. The impact on the Empire was devastating. Supply lines that had functioned for centuries broke down as rebel workers sabotaged critical infrastructure. Fleets that had been stationed in quiet sectors found themselves fighting desperate battles against enemies who knew their own worlds better than any imperial commander. Emperor Vorththal stood in his war room, staring at tactical displays that showed red warning symbols across half his empire. Each symbol represented a world in rebellion, a fleet under attack, or a supply route cut by sabotage. "How many worlds have we lost?" he asked his military advisors. General Krexthor consulted his reports with growing dismay. 47 worlds have declared independence, my lord. Another 100 are experiencing significant unrest. Our production capacity has dropped by 60%. And our fleets? Stretched thin, my emperor. We're fighting on too many fronts. Every time we concentrate forces in one sector, the humans attack somewhere else. The emperor's clawed hands gripped the edge of the tactical table hard enough to leave marks in the metal. This is impossible. We rule 1,000 worlds. How can a handful of primitives cause such chaos? My lord, said Chief Analyst Grethmar, quietly, I don't think we're fighting primitives anymore. On the bridge of the UES Indomitable, Admiral Park Jong-soo watched the tactical reports with satisfaction. The rebellion was proceeding exactly as human strategists had planned. The Empire is learning something new, he said to his staff. They've spent so long fighting conquests against divided enemies that they've forgotten how to fight a real war. Commander, Ryu looked up from his communication station. Sir, we're receiving reports from Special Forces teams on over 200 worlds. The uprisings are succeeding beyond our projections. Phase 2 is working perfectly, Admiral Park replied. Now, we move to Phase 3. He activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice reaching every human ship and every rebel vessel in the Alliance. All units, this is Admiral Park. The liberation of the slave worlds has begun. It's time to take this fight to the heart of the Empire. The final battle for the galaxy began when the massive human-led Alliance fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Vorththal system. Emperor Vorththal's capital world hung in space like a dark jewel, surrounded by the largest concentration of military power in Imperial history. Admiral Park Jong-soo stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the tactical displays that showed thousands of enemy ships arranged in defensive formations around their homeworld. The Emperor had called in every available vessel, creating a fleet so large it blotted out the stars. Sir, reported Commander Ryu Sung-ho, enemy fleet count is over 3,000 vessels. They outnumber us 5-1. Numbers aren't everything, Admiral Park replied calmly. What matters is who's doing the fighting and why. The human fleet had grown since the beginning of the war. Alongside the original 47 warships now sailed vessels from every liberated species. Clith raiders flew beside Nethros Science, ships converted to carriers. Delphari submarines that could operate in space flanked human destroyers. It was the most diverse military force in galactic history. On the Imperial flagship Eternal Dominion, Emperor Vorththal surveyed his enemies, with ancient yellow eyes that had witnessed the conquest of 1,000 worlds. Despite his overwhelming numerical advantage, he felt something he had not experienced in 8 centuries of rule. Doubt. My emperor, said Admiral Kithkar, still bearing scars from his first encounter with humans, perhaps we should negotiate. The cost of this battle will be enormous. Negotiate? The emperor's voice carried the fury of ages. I am Vorththal, master of the galaxy, crusher of worlds, enslaver of species. I do not negotiate with rebels and primitives. But even as he spoke, the emperor knew something had changed. The species he had conquered were no longer fighting as separate, desperate groups. They moved with unity and purpose that reminded him of the early days of the Vorthak Empire, when his people had been driven by dreams of glory rather than habits of domination. The battle began when human fighters launched from their carriers in precise formations. Squadron leader Bae Dong-min led the first wave, his pilots following attack patterns that had been perfected in months of combat against Imperial forces. Remember, we're not just fighting for victory, Bae transmitted to his squadron. We're fighting for every species in this galaxy that deserves to be free. The human fighters moved through the Imperial formation like schools of predatory fish, their weapons targeting critical systems with surgical precision. Behind them came the alien fighters, each species contributing its own unique advantages to the assault. Clith pilots used their compound eyes to track multiple targets simultaneously. Nethros fighters processed tactical data at incredible speeds, sharing targeting information instantly across the entire formation. Delphari craft moved with fluid grace that made them nearly impossible to hit. The Imperial response was massive, but uncoordinated. Vorthak commanders had spent centuries fighting enemies who broke and ran when faced with superior firepower. They had no experience dealing with an enemy that grew stronger and more determined as the battle progressed. Commander O.J. Hyun led his destroyer squadron in a flanking maneuver that brought them behind the main Imperial line. His ships had been modified with weapons designed by the combined scientific knowledge of a dozen species, creating firepower that no single race could have achieved alone. Target their command ships, O ordered. Cut off their communications and coordination. The destroyers struck like a hammer blow, their enhanced particle beams carving through Imperial shields and armor. Within minutes, half the enemy command structure was disabled or destroyed. But the real genius of the human strategy became apparent when the liberated worlds themselves joined the battle. Orbital defense platforms that had spent centuries protecting Imperial facilities suddenly turned their weapons on their former masters. On Clith Prime, Zikth watched from the planet's surface as massive mining lasers swiveled toward Imperial ships in orbit. The same tools that had been used to extract wealth for the Empire now burned through the hulls of Vorthak cruisers. For 30 years you made us build your weapons, Zikth transmitted to the Imperial fleet. Now learn how well we know their weaknesses. Emperor Vorthithal felt his empire crumbling around him as world after world turned against the fleet he had brought to protect them. Supply bases became enemy strongholds. Repair facilities refused to service Imperial ships. Even, the Empire's own slave soldiers began laying down their weapons. "This is impossible," he whispered, watching his tactical displays fill with red symbols representing lost ships and rebellious worlds. How can the order of 1,000 years collapse in a single day? The answer came from an unexpected source. Captain Lee Dae-ho, the human whose first encounter had started this war, appeared on the Imperial communication channels. "Emperor Vorthithal, your empire is finished," Lee said, his voice calm but implacable. "Your fleets are scattered, your worlds are free, and your people are tired of endless war. Surrender now, and we can end this without more bloodshed." The Emperor's reply came as a wordless roar of rage that echoed across every communication channel. The remaining Imperial ships launched a desperate final assault, throwing everything they had at the human flagship. The Indomitable shuddered under the massive bombardment, but its armor held. Engineer Commander Choi Min-ho, now serving aboard the flagship, worked frantically to maintain power to the shields as the ship absorbed enough firepower to destroy a moon. "Shields holding at 40%, he reported. "We can take this punishment all day if we need to." Admiral Park activated the fleet communication system one final time. "All ships, this is Admiral Park. End this war. Now." What happened next would be remembered in the history books of 100 species as the moment the galaxy changed forever. Every human ship, every liberated vessel, every converted defense platform fired simultaneously in a coordinated strike that lit up space, like a newborn star. When the light faded, the Imperial fleet was gone. Not destroyed, but disabled, their crews rescued by the same enemies they had tried to enslave. Emperor Vorthithal found himself aboard the Indomitable, standing in the conference room where his surrender would be negotiated. Across the table sat Admiral Park, Captain Lee, and representatives from every liberated species. "What do you want from us?" the Emperor asked, his voice hollow with defeat. Admiral Park's answer surprised him. "Nothing. Nothing. We don't want tribute, territory, or revenge," Admiral Park explained. "We want you to go home and learn to live in peace with your neighbors." Captain Lee leaned forward. "The Age of Empires is over, Vorthithal. From now on, every species gets to choose its own path." 6 months later, The First Galactic Liberation Council convened on a neutral world that had been chosen specifically because no empire had ever claimed it. Admiral Song Mi-kyung, representing humanity, sat at a round table with delegates from over 200 species. "We gather not to rule," she said in her opening address, "but to ensure that no species ever rules over another again." The former slave worlds had become independent nations, each developing according to its own nature and desires. The Clith rebuilt their mining worlds as centers of engineering excellence. The Nethros created vast information networks that connected peaceful civilizations across the galaxy. The Delphari restored their ocean worlds to their natural beauty, while sharing their knowledge of marine science. Even the Vorthak were welcomed into the new order, once they had abandoned their dreams of conquest and learned to contribute to galactic civilization rather than dominating it. In the years that followed, human ships could be seen throughout the galaxy, but not as conquerors. They served as peacekeepers, explorers, and teachers, helping young civilizations develop while ensuring that no new empires could arise to threaten galactic freedom. Captain Lee Dae-ho, now promoted to admiral, stood on the bridge of a new exploration vessel as it prepared to leave the galaxy entirely. Beyond the rim of known space lay other galaxies, other civilizations that might need help breaking free from their own empires. "Set course for the Andromeda Galaxy," he ordered. "Let's see. If anyone out there needs to learn about freedom," behind them, the Milky Way galaxy continued its peaceful development under the protection of the Free Worlds Alliance, where humans served not as masters, but as guardians of the principle that every thinking being had the right to choose its own destiny. The age of galactic empires was over. The age of galactic freedom had begun,